hear that there were no precautionary measures taken. Why not?
First of all, I resent your tone.
I resent the sarcasm. Again,
No, I resent your tone, lady, okay?
Why
This was a tragic accident. It's a tragic accident. Don't try and put yourself in the spotlight here, okay? This was an accident. Do you understand what I'm saying? An accident.
Those words from Vince McMahon, a man standing at a podium defending what happened on May 23, 1999, a night that would haunt the wrestling world forever, a night when Owen Hart fell 78 feet to his death and the show just kept going. Now WWE legends are finally revealing the disturbing truth about what really happened, as over the years since that day, they have come forward with their own accounts. And let me tell you, these stories paint a picture of profound grief, deep regret, and serious criticism of WWE's practices and their approach to safety. These aren't casual observations or passing comments, these are raw, emotional, heartbreaking testimonies from people who were there, who saw it happen, who lived through that nightmare, and what they reveal is absolutely chilling. In a May 2025 compilation video titled Owen Hart's Fall, legends share heartbreaking stories. Veterans like Jeff Jarrett and Harley Race recounted waiting at the hospital, praying desperately for a miracle that they knew deep down would never come, with Jeff Jarrett calling it the darkest night in WWE history. And when you hear him say those words, when you see the pain in his eyes even decades later, you understand he is not being dramatic or exaggerating, he is simply telling the truth about one of the worst experiences of his life. Steve Blackman, in a July 2025 interview with Chris Van Vliet, shared how the tragedy completely reshaped his views on safety in the wrestling business, saying, "I was there. It changed everything. Owen was the nicest guy." Simple words, but they carry so much weight because Steve Blackman, known as the Lethal Weapon, a tough, hard-hitting performer, spoke about how Owen's death changed him and made him think differently about the risks they all took every single night. It's powerful, the kind of thing that shows just how deep this trauma runs. Referee Teddy Long, who officiated the match immediately after Owen's fall, described the eerie silence backstage and his absolute dread at having to step into that ring. He said, "I didn't want to ref that match, but the show went on." Can you imagine being put in that position, being told that despite what just happened, despite someone dying, you still have to go out there and do your job? The mental and emotional strain is almost impossible to comprehend, yet that was exactly what these performers were expected to do. Then there was Jimmy Corderas, the referee who was actually in the ring when Owen fell. He had to live with what he saw every single day. He was gripping the top rope near the corner where Owen descended, felt something brush his head and shoulder, and heard screaming, instinctively ducking as the rope snapped back. When he turned, he saw Owen lying there face up in his costume, eyes wide open, completely unresponsive, with a severe gash on his forearm exposing tissue. Corderas yelled, "We need help," to the timekeeper, but the man just froze. He was in complete shock. Nobody knew what to do, and nobody had prepared for something like this. EMTs rushed in, and Corderas followed the stretcher all the way to the ambulance, where he saw Owen in distress. He was so shaken that someone gave him a cigarette to calm down. The next day, when Jerry Lawler told him that he had witnessed the final 20 feet of the fall and thought Owen was going to land on him, Corderas was overwhelmed with guilt, saying, "A family lost a son, a husband, a father, and I could have been part of that tragedy." In a 2022 interview, he described the surreal silence of the crowd and his mixed feelings about the show continuing, likening it to a NASCAR race that goes on after a crash. He said, "It's easy to say afterward, the show should have stopped. I was on the fence. I'm glad I'm not the one who had to make that call." He officiated the next match reluctantly, haunted by what he called the jumbled mess in his head. Then there's Charles Wright, better known as the Godfather, who was scheduled to defend the Intercontinental Championship against Owen that night. He spent the day joking with Owen backstage, just having a good time like they always did. They were friends, colleagues, brothers in this business. He was encouraging the female performers behind the curtain just before Owen's entrance, and then as Owen was rappelling down, Wright was in the middle of saying, "Don't worry if you mess up. If you fall, I'll do this," when someone burst in and said, "Owen fell." Think about that for a second. He was joking about Owen falling, and then it actually happened. When Wright looked at the monitors and saw Owen's body, everything blurred into trauma. He doesn't remember canceling the match. He doesn't remember much of anything after that moment. All he recalls is calling his wife immediately, and later she had to tell him details he had completely blacked out. In a 2024 interview with Chris Van Vliet, Charles Wright reflected on this emotional void, saying, "I just remembered what Owen looked like when he came through the curtain. I've never seen the footage. It was a blur after that." The human brain does strange things when confronted with trauma like that. It protects itself by shutting down, by refusing to process what's happening. JBL, John Bradshaw Layfield, shared a cramped Kansas City dressing room with Owen and Ron Simmons that afternoon. After the fall, he was given the horrible task of informing The Undertaker, who was preparing for his match with Steve Austin, that Owen was gone. He said, "Taker looked at me and there was just shock. Backstage was complete pandemonium. Wrestlers were given the choice to perform or sit out with no pressure amid the overwhelming grief." JBL vividly recalled seeing Vince McMahon's raw vulnerability that night. He said, "I saw Vince with tears in his eyes. He couldn't even talk. He loved Owen and was absolutely heartbroken. Vince had no idea what to do. There's no template for this stuff." In a December 2024 podcast appearance, JBL defended the decision to continue the show due to absent protocols, but stressed the heartbreak everyone felt. He said, "I don't know if Owen was technically dead, but he was turning color and he was gone." Jeff Jarrett's story is particularly haunting. His match was scheduled to follow Owen's entrance, and the stage manager warned him that Owen was going to the ring and he'd be up next, expecting about 15 to 18 minutes. 3 minutes later, he was told, "You're on now." Something had gone terribly wrong, but nobody was telling him exactly what. When he entered the ring, Jarrett sensed something was wrong. The rope felt unnaturally loose, and there was a dip in the mat where Owen had impacted. There was no blood that he could see, but Jeff Jarrett's gut was screaming that something was seriously wrong. He cut a promo as Owen's body was being wheeled past him, not fully processing what was happening, saying, "In my gut, I didn't think it through, but I was like, okay, this is bad." After finishing his segment, Jarrett rushed backstage and demanded to be taken to the hospital. In a January 2025 podcast with Bobby Bones, he admitted that he had compartmentalized it at the time as another day at work with a tragic accident, but sobriety later forced him to reckon with it. He said, "That was the one thing in recovery I never processed. It caught up to me." The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was backstage discussing his match with Triple H when Sergeant Slaughter announced that Owen was hurt. At first, he thought it was one of Owen's pranks. Owen was famous for being a jokester, but when he got to position and saw people crying, he knew it was real. He looked out and saw EMTs giving CPR to Owen in front of a silent arena. He wanted to go out there and help, but Vince advised him not to because it would confuse the storylines. Even in that moment of crisis, the show, the storylines, the entertainment, it all had to continue. The Rock prayed, helped load the stretcher, and even rode in the ambulance in the passenger seat, watching as medical personnel made every effort to save Owen's life. Just 2 minutes before his match was set to begin, he learned that Owen had died. He felt completely numb but tried to channel Owen's spirit, imagining him saying, "DJ, you have to go out there." Owen would have wanted that. These accounts, every single one of them, reveal something crucial. They show the genuine deep love Owen Hart's colleagues had for him, the profound regret over risks that were preventable, and the fact that men and women were forced to continue performing while their friend was dying. But what exactly happened that night? What went so catastrophically wrong that a routine entrance turned into a fatal tragedy? The night everything changed. To understand the full weight of what these legends experienced, we need to go back to May 23, 1999, at Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. The arena was packed with over 16,000 people, all there for WWE's Over the Edge pay-per-view event. The energy in the building was electric. People were excited, pumped up, ready to see their favorite superstars do what they do best. Nobody in that arena, absolutely nobody, could have imagined what was about to unfold right before their eyes. Owen Hart, one of the most beloved wrestlers in the industry and a member of the legendary Hart wrestling family, was preparing for what should have been a simple, straightforward entrance. He was 34 years old, known for his athleticism, humor, and technical skill in the ring, playing a character called the Blue Blazer, essentially a superhero parody gimmick. The plan seemed simple on paper. Owen would be suspended high in the rafters, attached to a harness, and then descend into the ring in a dramatic, superhero-like fashion. It was meant to entertain, to get a reaction from the crowd, just another night at the office for a professional wrestler who had performed countless stunts throughout his career. But this is where things turned dark. The rigging setup for Owen's entrance wasn't just inadequate, it was downright dangerous. They used a lightweight carabiner clip designed for theater props, one that only required 6 pounds of pressure to release. Let that sink in. 6 pounds. Owen Hart was a 230-pound man, suspended 78 feet in the air on equipment that was completely, utterly, and catastrophically insufficient for the job. And it gets worse. Much worse. WWE had hired a cheaper, less experienced rigging team from Salt Lake City, bypassing a more seasoned crew that had safely handled similar stunts for WCW Sting and even for high-profile events like Elton John concerts. They chose to cut costs, to save money, to take the cheaper option when a man's life was literally hanging in the balance. This is the disturbing truth the legends are talking about: not murder, not conspiracy, but negligence, pure preventable negligence.
Everything that should have taken place in terms of rigging, to our knowledge at this moment, did take place. It was rehearsed in the afternoon, and everything was fine. And that's all I know.
Vince McMahon would later claim at a press conference that the stunt had been rehearsed in the afternoon and everything was fine, but clearly something was not fine. Something was catastrophically wrong with the equipment, the setup, or the execution. What happened next is something people who were there that night will never forget. As Owen began his descent from the rafters, something went horribly, catastrophically wrong. The clip unexpectedly unlatched, and Owen hurtled downward. Eyewitnesses, including referee Jimmy Corderas, recalled Owen yelling, "Look out!" as he fell, desperately trying to warn the people below him and avoid landing on anyone. Even in his final moments, Owen Hart was thinking about others, a selfless act that may have worsened his injuries by altering his trajectory. The 34-year-old superstar hit the top rope of the ring, and the impact was devastating. The fall severed his aorta, the main artery that carries blood from the heart to the rest of the body, and when that tears, there's very little time. He was bleeding internally. Medical personnel, including EMTs who later testified in lawsuits, described a chaotic scene. Owen arrived conscious but in agony, gasping for air, before succumbing on the way to the hospital. He was rushed to Truman Medical Center, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead just 33 minutes later. 33 minutes. That's all it took for one of wrestling's brightest stars to be gone forever. Now here's something absolutely crucial to understand. The moment of Owen's fall was captured on WWE cameras. The footage exists, sitting somewhere in WWE's archives. But here's the thing, T was not broadcast live. At the exact moment Owen fell, a pre-recorded promo was airing instead, so most people watching at home on pay-per-view had no idea what had just happened. They were spared the horror of witnessing a man fall to his death in real time, but the people in the arena saw everything, heard everything, and experienced every terrifying second. Then came the decision that would spark controversy and outrage for decades, a decision the legends we've been hearing from still grapple with. Vince McMahon, chairman of WWE, made the call to continue the event. After just a brief delay, the matches went on, performed on a blood-stained mat littered with debris from Owen's impact. Wrestlers were expected to entertain while one of their friends, colleagues, and brothers in the business was fighting for his life and ultimately losing. McMahon later defended this decision in the 2024 Netflix documentary Mr. McMahon, explaining that the live crowd hadn't clearly seen the fall and that attendees came to see a show, not someone die. He even claimed that if it were his son Shane or himself who had died, he'd want the production to continue. He framed it as a business imperative, saying things like, "Let's move on. Let's keep the show going."
This is a stunt that's performed on a routine basis in any number of venues. Owen was simply to descend into the ring in superhero-like fashion.
Why was he not on a full A line or some other backup line, which is normally used for anybody that's using a rigging? But there would be a safeguard that someone would control.
I'm not an expert on rigging, I guess you are.
But here's what makes this even more heartbreaking and difficult to process. Kansas City authorities did not intervene. They allowed the event to continue, even though a fatal accident had just occurred in a public venue. Attendees described a surreal atmosphere, with many initially mistaking the fall for part of the show. One attendee recalled on Reddit, "After they put Owen on a stretcher and carted him out, it all kind of just mushes together. The energy in the building completely changed. It was dead silent for a bit. The show literally went on." Commentator Jim Ross, a close personal friend of Owen Hart, was thrust into an impossible situation. With just 10 seconds notice via his headset, he had to break the news live on air, about an hour after the fall. Can you imagine having to tell millions of people around the world that your friend just died, with only 10 seconds to prepare yourself mentally? JR's words that night have become etched in wrestling history. Something went terribly wrong. This was not part of the entertainment. This was as real as it gets. In interviews later, Jim Ross described Owen as unusually subdued backstage that night, lacking his typical joviality and expressing quiet unease about the stunt. But Owen never refused to do it. Why? Because he was a company man. He did what he was told to do. He trusted the people who were supposed to keep him safe. And that trust cost him everything. JR later reflected in a 2023 segment, saying, "Owen Hart's death will always haunt me." He emphasized the emotional toll, the absolute weight of having to announce a friend's passing to millions of viewers. Jerry, the King Lawler, who was ringside, witnessed the impact firsthand and somberly told viewers, "It doesn't look good at all." The wrestling community came together in that moment of grief, with over 300 wrestlers attending Owen's funeral in Calgary 300. That number alone shows just how respected, loved, and universally admired Owen Hart was in the wrestling industry. Everyone knew him, liked him, and had a story about his kindness, devotion to his family, incredible sense of humor, and legendary backstage pranks. The public reaction to the continuation of the show was immediate and fierce, with fans and critics condemning the decision as inhumane and disrespectful. The Undertaker, who had to perform in the main event that night, later reflected on the motto, "The show must go on," saying, "I just don't know that was the right thing to do," emphasizing the emotional toll on performers forced to wrestle while mourning. The 2020 documentary series Dark Side of the Ring dedicated an episode to Owen's final days, amplifying these voices and exposing WWE's cost-driven shortcuts and McMahon's callous pragmatism. The episode reignited debates about that night, with viewers calling the continuation of the show a mistake that drained the event's energy and risked further injuries amid the collective trauma. This tragedy remains one of the darkest chapters in WWE history, marked by allegations of negligence, cost-cutting, and the controversial decision to continue the show, and its effects are still felt today. Now we turn to Bret Hart, Owen's older brother, whose reflections on Owen's death are not just about loss but also about anger, conspiracy theories, family conflicts, and trying to honor his little brother's memory in a world that seems determined to erase it. When Bret first heard about Owen's death, he was in Japan working for WCW, and his mother called him, saying, "Owen fell, he's gone." In a 2000 interview with Michael Landsberg on Off the Record, Bret broke down completely, saying, "I just lost it. I screamed. I punched the wall. I thought, this can't be real. Owen was the best athlete in our family. How could this happen?" He flew home immediately and collapsed at Owen's funeral in Calgary, where over 300 wrestlers had gathered to pay their respects. But things get even darker. Devastated and still bitter from his own experience with the 1997 Montreal Screwjob, where Vince McMahon had famously double-crossed him, Bret initially believed that WWE had killed Owen as revenge. In the 2020 documentary series Dark Side of the Ring and the 2024 Netflix documentary Mr. McMahon, Bret recalled those dark thoughts, saying, "For a long time, I thought Vince had him killed to get back at me." Bret kept thinking maybe they had cut the cable. It was paranoia, but it felt real to him, a man who had just lost his brother, his mind going to the darkest place, wondering if the company they had devoted their lives to had actually orchestrated a murder. A Kansas City police investigation eventually found no criminal intent, determining that the harness, a theater-grade quick-release mechanism, simply failed under Owen's weight. Bret later admitted, "Once the facts came out, I knew it wasn't murder, but it was still preventable negligence." And that's what this whole tragedy comes down to. It wasn't murder, it wasn't some elaborate conspiracy, it was negligence, cutting corners, choosing to save money instead of ensuring the safety of the people putting their bodies on the line every night. Owen's widow, Martha Hart, filed an $18 million wrongful death lawsuit against WWE, exposing disturbing facts like the use of untested cheap rigging equipment and no proper safety rehearsals. In a shocking twist, WWE even tried to sue Martha for breaching Owen's contract, attempting to shift jurisdiction and limit the damages they would pay. The case eventually settled for $18 million, which Martha used to found the Owen Hart Foundation, providing scholarships and helping at-risk youth, ensuring Owen's legacy continues positively outside WWE's control. She maintains that WWE is responsible for Owen's death, saying, "I continue to hold them accountable. It was preventable." But here's where the family dynamics become even more complicated and painful. Bret has grown increasingly frustrated with Martha's refusal to allow Owen to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, publicly criticizing her for what he sees as erasing his brother's legacy and denying fans the closure they deserve. He has said things like, "Martha's erasing Owen's legacy. He loved wrestling. He'd want to be remembered in the Hall of Fame. I respect her pain, but this isn't what Owen would want." Other legends, like Mark Henry, have publicly urged the Hart family to allow Owen's induction, showing an industry-wide frustration with the situation. But Martha has her own perspective, one that deserves to be heard and respected. She was not consulted for the Mr. McMahon documentary and has used every resource at her disposal to preserve Owen's memory on her own terms, not WWE's, protecting her husband's legacy in the way she sees fit, and that is her right as his widow. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories about Owen's death continue to swirl, with YouTube videos titled things like "Vince McMahon murdered Owen Hart" getting millions of views, claiming sabotage via remote-triggered release mechanisms or even suggesting Illuminati involvement. These theories resurface on social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, especially around the anniversary of his death. Brett's early suspicions lent some credence to these ideas in people's minds, but police findings thoroughly debunked them. Focusing on wild conspiracy theories only distracts from the real issue. A man died because proper safety precautions weren't taken. That is the disturbing truth, not some elaborate murder plot, but simple, preventable negligence driven by a desire to cut costs. Former WWE head writer Vince Russo addressed these conspiracy theories directly in a 2022 interview, dismissing sabotage claims but admitting the stunt carried serious risks, saying, "Owen was hysterical, lovable, we never meant harm." Russo even revealed that McMahon initially resisted doing a tribute show for Owen, preferring to sweep it under the rug, and it was only after The Rock made an emotional on-air plea for Owen's son, OJ, that McMahon changed his mind. WWE's approach to the tragedy is further illustrated by the Over the Edge 1999 event being available for streaming on Peacock, but with all Owen references removed, as if trying to pretend it never happened and erase the memory of that night to avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth. In October 2025, a WWE star reflected on the personal toll of that night, noting how it traumatized every wrestler. Yet Owen's influence and legacy persist despite WWE's attempts at erasure. The Owen Hart Foundation has transformed the tragedy into something positive, providing aid to vulnerable communities, while AEW runs an annual Owen Hart tournament honoring his in-ring excellence, something Jeff Jarrett called more important than anything he has accomplished. AEW has embraced Owen's memory in a way WWE never could, giving fans a chance to celebrate his life and career. On the 25th anniversary of Owen's death in 2024, Brett posted an emotional message on social media, capturing the unresolved pain that still exists, saying, "Vince brought so much anger to our family." Owen's niece, Natalia, also a WWE wrestler, recalled in November 2025 the family's compounded grief, saying, "It hurts infinitely worse for us. For the Hart family, this isn't just history. This isn't just a story. This is their ongoing reality. This is the pain they live with every single day." What these legends' revelations collectively expose is what we've been calling the disturbing truth, and that truth isn't about murder or some grand conspiracy. It's about a culture of recklessness, where profit was valued more than safety, where the show must go on mattered more than protecting performers, leaving an indelible scar on the wrestling industry that still affects how wrestlers and fans think about the business today. As Jim Ross poignantly said, Owen did not die in vain. His story drives ongoing calls for reform in professional wrestling. Safety protocols have been implemented, standards raised, and performers now have more say in the stunts they attempt, but the fact that it took a man's death to make these changes is truly disturbing. Owen Hart was 34 when he died. He had a wife who loved him, 2 young children who needed him, a brother who looked up to him, hundreds of colleagues who respected him, and millions of fans who admired him, and all of that was taken away in an instant because someone decided to use a 6-pound quick-release mechanism to suspend a 230-pound man 78 feet in the air, choosing to save a few dollars over ensuring a human being's safety. 26 years later, we're still talking about Owen Hart, still sharing his story, still calling for accountability, and still honoring his memory not just as a wrestler who died tragically, but as a husband, father, brother, friend, and one of the greatest performers the wrestling business has ever seen. He was known for being the nicest guy, for his incredible sense of humor, for his legendary pranks, for his technical mastery in the ring, and for his dedication to his family above all else. The disturbing truth about Owen Hart's death isn't a mystery, it's not hidden, and it's not some conspiracy that needs unraveling. The truth is right there in plain sight. Negligence, cost-cutting, and a show-must-go-on mentality that valued entertainment over human life. Until we fully acknowledge that truth, learn from it, and make sure it never happens again, Owen Hart's legacy will remain incomplete. Rest in peace, Owen Hart, the King of Hearts, the Blue Blazer, a legend taken far too soon. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, click on one of the suggested videos on your screen right now for more amazing content.